Board games is what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. Today we're going to talk about working with publishers. This is something that we've been doing for some number of years. And over there, you will all know the person known as Alan Paull. And over there, how do you do? I hope you are very well today, Matthew. And over there, it's Rita. I see. I'm sorry that I couldn't think of a rhyme. That's bad on me. But anyway, we're talking about working with publishers. It's what we're talking about. Working with publishers as a designer. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. This is episode 377 of Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder. I am streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time for the next 23 days. And today we are discussing working with publishers with Rita Modl, Matthew Dunstan.
Hello.
And Alan Paull. And just for clarity, of course, this is part of the designer series, so we are talking from the perspective of being a designer, not being a fulfillment company or a manufacturer or something like that. We are assuming that you are previously in our series, we've talked about inventing the game, going on to design it, to develop it, to pitch it to a publisher, and now maybe you're at the stage where you're working with a publisher. You've got someone that you're working with, and how is that relationship going to work? But before we get to that, let's go round clockwise and talk a tiny bit about who we are and maybe a tiny bit about what we've done in terms of working with publishers. So yes, Alan, who are you? What publishers have you worked with?
Yes, I'm Alan Paull. I am a designer. I'm also a publisher because I own Surprise Sillier Games. So I have two hats. Missing my hats. Never mind. So I've done quite a lot of publishing and quite a lot of pitching because what we tend to do at Surprise Sillier is we print relatively small volumes of stuff, and then we pitch or license our stuff to other publishers. So it's a slightly different situation from what normal designers will do. And I think we've probably increased our co-publishing with other publishers over the past 5 or 6 years, I think. But it's kind of similar because you're still persuading other publishers to license product. So it's very similar to pitching, except very often we will have an actual physical copy of our version of the final product. So it's slightly easier. And Surprise Sillier has been going on for since about 2000. So I've been doing it for just over 20 years. So it's quite a reasonable track record of things that we've done. And we'll get into that a bit later.
And hello again, Matthew. Lovely to see you. And so, Alan, at the point that you've got an actual short run of a game, but you're sharing it with a publisher for a bigger print run, I guess at that point it's very similar in that you are happy to let them make changes, to adapt it, to make it a better fit for their own line.
Yes.
And Rita, can you talk a wee bit about who you are and what publishers you've worked with?
I'm Rita Modl. I'm also a board game designer, and I'm working with publishers like, for example, Korax or Billet Duc and Zoch. And but I'm also working with a game agency, which is very interesting because the game agency is the middle one between the publisher and the designer, and can also do a lot of stuff and can also help to to get the communication good.
And that's definitely something that maybe we would talk a wee bit about, that middle person of the agency.
Yeah.
And a quick Guten Morgen, or how do you pronounce this, Matthew?
Dobre rano.
Dobre rano. Sounds kind of Italian.
Well,
I know it's Czech.
You could say it however you can. I can't do a good Russian accent. You can make it sound very Russian as well, maybe.
Anyway, good morning, Alex. It's lovely to see you. And my final guest is, of course, Matthew Dunstan from Prague. So, what publishers have you worked with?
Quite a few. I've worked with Days of Wonder. I've worked with Cosmos, Funforge, Pegasus, Flying Games, Yellow, Ludi Creations, AEG, Tasty Minstrel, Alley Cat, Z-Man, Lookout, Space Cowboys, Ravensburger.
Yeah, send us a list, and now we can look at
Sorry.
And Surprise Star Games.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I should. Yeah, I've got the little here. See, this is
there we go. Yes,
little thing together. The mini expansion to Snowdonia, Trans Australia.
Yeah, that was good.
Yes, so yes, exactly. That best experience with a publisher I've ever had. Probably, in fact, one of the easiest experiences I've ever had with a publisher, which was just like a quick sort of, do you want to do the game? Yep. Okay. How does X amount of quid sound for it? Yep. Sounds good. Okay.
Very
wow,
easy.
That is very fast. Whoa, cool.
Well,
Alex says maybe it would be better to name the ones you haven't worked with.
Yes.
Slightly facetiously, of course. Because there are probably tens of publishers emerging every single year.
Oh, of course. No, the list of. I mean, you just look at any. I mean, look at Essen, right? I mean, how many publishers are there? Hundreds, right? Yeah. So.
And that's just the ones who got to go to Essen.
No, indeed. So yeah, no, I've worked with a lot of publishers at the time, and pitched to a lot of publishers who I haven't necessarily had games with. Yeah, so definitely happy to talk about various experiences there.
Did you want to know which ones I didn't mention any of the publishers I've worked with. Well, I've worked with Modifius and with Two Tomatoes and Frosted Games in Spain and Germany, respectively. A bit with Cosmos, and we worked with NSK Boards and Dice. So yeah, and indie
boarding cards.
Indie boarding cards.
But they don't exist anymore.
They don't exist, exactly. Yes. So.
Well, they merged with Stronghold.
Yeah, that's part of this whatever indie game. But I guess they actually still are releasing it.
Like, there are still a separate imprints, like Indie Boards and Cards and Stronghold Games are still two separate imprints, I thought.
Yeah, you just don't see them releasing as much stuff these days, it seems.
And Lookout Games, quite a lot of Lookout Games as well.
I am also here, of course. I have worked with more than one publisher. I've had stuff. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I've only had stuff actually released by one publisher, although it sold a good number, and I'm happy with that. Which is Yogi. I've worked as a developer, which is a completely different discussion, with Alley Cat Games, which is not what we're talking about. I have submitted things to lots of folk. I've chatted to folk, and even that is kind of building up a relationship. So even though I've not had anything published with Helvetic, for example, chatting to Hadi and working out, okay, this is what you want. And then seeing Hadi a couple of times last year, by which I mean before COVID. So that was in January, Nuremberg, and February, Cannes. I want to say, just to be clear, I wasn't, gallivanting around to Switzerland, during COVID. In fact, things ground to a halt, which was slightly sad. But yeah, I had something that has been, once we are able to work together, I am planning to head up to Alan Paull's house to finish working on a game that was formerly known as Yo-Dog. I heard you like moving gnomes, to move a gnome, to move a gnome, to maybe, to move a gnome, there's a third gnome, to maybe remove a tile. That's important. It's not just moving a gnome to move a gnome to maybe remove the tile. It's move a gnome to move a gnome to move a gnome to maybe remove a tile.
Very important distinction, and that's not the name of the game. Let's face it.
And that's not the final name. It's the name that I'm going to. It's the original name. It's like the same way that Yogi started off as Redonkulous. It's still the name in my heart. It's still the name in my heart.
I don't think it'll fit easily on the box.
I am not expecting it to be there.
We're very much looking forward. We're very much looking forward.
Oh my gosh! I can't believe I forgot that. Yes, Dice and Ink. I have some printed things there. Yes, Dice and Ink. I did also get paid money by them. Sadly, Dice and Ink have folded. I have how many copies of the game do I have? I've got about 250 because they said that I could buy some at a nice price, but once I've bought it, I probably won't be able to buy it anymore. They weren't anticipating, closing shop, but yeah, Dice and Ink is basically no more. And of course, I have been paid money by Inside the Box, so for Seize the Power, I should definitely mention them as a designer. And anyway, so it's like gnome billiards. And yep, that is definitely sad about Dice and Ink, 100%. But let's get to the regular topics. We're going to go through some regular things about what we've been up to, have some time for questionably quick questions, talk about why publishers are brilliant, and then we will get into the main topic. So let's start off with recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. One of my recent highlights is Monday afternoons. I like to try as much as I can to stay away from obligations and stay away from the screen. That's what I was trying to do. I did read a bit of a book by David Graeber called Bullshit Jobs, which is about the way that middle management is often messed up and the problems in a lot of working environments, and talking about how these problems could potentially be rectified. It's a mixture of personal anecdotes from a lot of people who submitted stories and David Graeber's own observations. I also played a couple of games of Keyforge with lovely Layla, and we got together. We played with two decks that neither of us had ever looked at the cards more than just like, okay, that person sent me the deck. I got them secondhand for a cheap price, because that's the way with these sorts of games. If you don't care about what decks you get, you can probably buy some for quite cheap. And had so much fun. The first game that we played, which was two that were actually in the starter deck, they were completely imbalanced. But these two, it felt perfect. These two decks, it was so nice. They were both about creature removal. Both of them had logos and cards about drawing extra cards. One of them had my deck that I was playing. I could keep putting things into my archive and building up a bigger and bigger hand, essentially. But then Layla's deck had one card in it, which could eliminate everything in my archive and get an ember for everything there. So there was kind of a push your luck thing. And I was like, okay, I've got 5 cards in my archive. I'm going to have the most amazing turn next turn. And then Layla wiped it all out and stole 5 ember from me. It was, I love how I don't know which cards were designed by which people, but I do think that there's definitely a talent in that game for some cards that can just, in the right situations, completely turn the game on its head. There are some really drastic cards when you think, oh my gosh, how could they do this? Like the one card where you keep stealing from your opponents until you have more than them. So like if it's 0 and 6 or 1 and 6, then you're basically stealing 3 of their things. And it's, what? They made a game that does this? Or there's a card which you can just keep obliterating everything on the board, like big reset buttons. And anyway, that was a big thing for me. And hello, Keymaster Music, who says, I love Rita's cup of tea. It is huge.
I think it's not huge. It's just, there's my camera, and that I'm just having it here, but it's a normal cup of tea.
Fair enough.
Yeah, my recent highlights. So I have two. So the first one I played Barrage again, and I played it the last time. It was half a year ago, and I didn't remember the rules, and so somebody has to tell me the rules again, and I didn't get it. And after two rounds, I just remember, oh yeah, there was this and this, but then it was too late, and then so I lose very, very badly. So, but yeah, and we had the deluxe one with the mountain one and the coins and so on. So very, very special. And the table was full of this game with all this stuff. So this was very cool. And my second highlight is I'm on a diet.
That's a highlight?
Yes, because
Is
normally,
it the achievements that you've managed to stick to it? Is that basically the highlight?
yes, and normally I'm on a diet, and I said, "Oh no, please not!" But now I'm very, very motivated, and I think I will do it, and I will do it. I think 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think putting a timeline on it, saying, okay, after this, I'll reevaluate.
Yeah.
I think that can give you the motivation to
So
do things.
I've lost 2 kilos. Can you see that? No?
You're always looking great. You always look wonderful. A quick hello to Nicholas. It is lovely to see you. And Alex says that they recently had a successful playtest of a game that Alex and Rob are working on. And they played it with Idle Michael. It didn't break, and we have some extra feedback and some more context for the next iteration. That sounds like a productive playtest. And let's carry on. Anyone else got any more recent highlights? Alan?
That's great, yeah. Well, my recent highlight, it was my birthday on Sunday, so that was fun. So I'm now 64, so I've reached the Paul McCartney age. But we had a nice relaxing day. We actually went to, because it was, well, okay, it was the day before the release date of the 17th of May. But we went to the Wimpole estate down near Royston, which is a fairly large manor house out in the country, and we went for a lovely walk all the way around the Wimpole estate. It was really good, and bizarrely, it didn't even rain. We went with raincoats because it was like the weather forecast was quite bad. But it held off and it didn't rain at all. It rained on the way there in the car, and it rained on the way back, but it didn't rain while we were there, which was God on my side, I think, which is nice. What else? I'm due to get a copy of No Retreat Russian Front Deluxe, because it's on the GMT games do a really nice idea, which is the P500. So basically, they won't print a game until you get at least 500 pre-orders. So I'm on the pre-order for that. So that will come out in due course. What else? We had Persian chicken, delicious Persian chicken for lunch. That was my choice. So that was good. I ought to also mention,
please don't talk about something to eat.
The food. No, I have to because it's my highlights. You see, you stop your ears up, switch your sound off. You'll be fine. But also, I ought to point out that I did cook the lamb dish with the rhubarb that Bez mentioned. We cooked that not on my birthday, but a few days ago, and it was really, really good. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that again. Since we have a large rhubarb patch, we will definitely do that again. It's well worth trying. It doesn't. I mean, the recipe doesn't sound necessarily.
If you want to try it, it's in the Discord, and I've got the recipe in the Discord.
Yeah, definitely do that. It's good. You might need. I think I didn't put enough celery in. Probably put a bit more celery. Anyway, other highlight is we've got a family get together coming up on Saturday, so it's a kind of future thing, really.
That sounds fantastic.
It's great. Shall I mention my book of the fortnight?
Sure. Mention your book of the fortnight.
This is my book of the fortnight. It's my favorite war game rules title, Typing Error. It's produced by Graham Evans. There he is, Tribune. And it's tabletop wargaming rules for basically 19th century China, and it's really good. Now, this is actually relevant to today's topic because this is effectively self-published book by Graham. But the thing is here, if you look at some of the stuff inside, it's trying to find a nice pretty page of things that you can do nowadays. So these things that you can do nowadays, self-publishing, it looks really attractive. It's well laid out. It's very professional. Nice pictures and things in it. And you can do this really easily. And you can get this through Amazon or through Lulu. If I compare this one, which came out within the last couple of years, compare this. Exactly. That's why it's called Typing Error. Because it's Typing Rebellion. For those who don't know, it's Typing Rebellion. All the whole mid-19th century China. This is a counter example, if you like. This was produced in 1977, and it's a set of American Civil War rules. And if you look at this, you've got. Look at this. Look, this is the kind of standard. This is produced by a company called Newbury Rules, but the kind of thing that we used to have to put up with back in the day. You see, it just looks like a set of basically photocopied A4 sheets.
Very tiny text.
Very tiny text.
Yes.
And these little reference bits and pieces which you can hardly see them. There's a little tiny little. Look at this. This is A4. You're supposed to use this. Oh God, can you see that? Hardly. Look up the melee factor. Yeah, not great. So that's just a comparison. But what you could do.
So the lesson here is that there is potential,
and this is what you can do now.
Technology to do self-publishing.
Really, really good stuff. So I thoroughly recommend. If you're into wargaming at all, these rules are good. Graham Evans' rules are really good. They give you a lot of ideas. Even if you don't use them, they give you lots of ideas. So that's Typing Error by Graham. And
Matthew, what are some of your recent highlights?
You've thrown me. I feel like you've put me right up on the big screen now. I feel like I have to have similarly important thoughts. Yeah, that's a bit better. A little less pressure there. I don't. We've still been playing some games, which is nice. I got a lot. I think maybe I chatted a couple of weeks ago about getting a lot of these NSV mini games and Hashi, which is a new release by Jeff Allers, also with NSV, slightly bigger roll and write or flip and fill, which has been quite fun. So yeah, we've enjoyed playing those. I guess a future highlight is I am finally getting a haircut tomorrow after I haven't had my haircut for about a year, probably the longest in my life. I haven't had a haircut, so that will be good. And yeah, I think those are sort of the main things, I guess. Sorry, I haven't had quite as much going on as the rest. Bez, I think you're muted, just by the way.
I appreciate that, and I think that okay, so we move on now to our questionably quick questions. So if you have any questionably quick questions, then please ask them right now. And the first question I always like to ask ourselves and anyone else who wants to share is, what time is it? Where are you? I am in London, UK. It is 10:24. It just changed. Rita.
I am near Munich and it's 11:24, and in the other cup of is coffee, tea, and water. Yeah.
Alan. Well, I'm at the Battle of Bosworth on the 22nd of August, 1485 at the moment. As you can see, just over there on my table. Well, you can't really see it very well. That's my Battle of Bosworth thingy, which I'm currently trying to do for Kingmaker.
What's the time in the Battle of Bosworth? That's what we really want to know.
Well, that's towards the end. Yeah, that's probably late afternoon, I think. Yes, it's all going horribly wrong for Henry Tudor in that version. So look forward to Richard III staying on the throne for a few more decades.
I'm going to nod and just pretend that I know the full import of what that would mean with my excellent. I'm only responsible for scientific knowledge, not for historical knowledge. I think we established before.
But we've established that you are not responsible for all the science knowledge in the world.
Well, I don't know. It seemed like I was responsible. I didn't. There was expectation.
You see,
Anyway.
if Henry Tudor loses the battle, we've got no Tudor dynasty. There isn't. I mean, just have just Yorkists. It'll be a totally different English history, you see.
Again, I'll just nod about the historical import of how... Would Australia still get founded, Alan? That's all I wanted to know.
Well, that's a good question.
Not founded, rather, I should say colonized, of course.
Colonized. Yes, it's probably, actually, I think you're doomed whichever way. Yeah.
Well, maybe I think Dutch,
Matthew, you are based in Czech Republic.
I am in Prague. It is now, after all that, it's now 11:26. So...
And so we've got a couple of questionably quick questions. Rita's already answered what's in the cup. Keymaster asks you, Alan, presumably the books have a digital version. Are you aware of that?
That's a good question. I don't know, but there was
the information. You've got the title.
There was a link which hopefully
a quick hello to... Yes, I pasted your link, Alan, don't worry. A quick hello to Rob Harper. Thank you for joining us. Hello to Designer Cardboard. It's lovely to have you. And Nicholas says, just think of all the Tudor houses. Won't somebody please think of the Tudor houses? Well, not literally those words, but that's the vibe I'm getting. And, yep. So, if no one else has any more questionably quick... Oh, wait. There was one from, I do apologize, from Alex. Would you trade sheep for wood? So, So I'm wondering, what context? Like, if we're talking about Catan, then what have I already built? How much wool do I have? How much wood do I have? You know, how much is left of the game? Am I going to try and build some cities? Do I want to double my resources made? Do I want to get some of those cards? Maybe that's the way I want to get my final few victory points. It's all contextual. I'm going to just give a cop-out answer and say, yes, in theory, I would, but only at certain points. Rita?
So if I don't think of Catan, if I think of living in the here and now, so wood is running very empty right now. So I definitely would trade a sheep for wood.
Okay.
No.
So did you hear about that? The wood is getting very very expensive. Did you hear about that?
I was not familiar with this. No.
Yeah, but it is.
Okay.
So not gold is the stuff right now. It's wood.
So you want to get rid of more sheep and get more wood in the world?
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah, That's my plan. I'm not doing board games anymore. I'm having sheeps and trade them to wood. Yes.
With all the aliens who kind of transmogrify things. Okay. And Alan, would you trade your sheep for wood?
Only if I can subsequently trade the wood for the complete set of all the salt. Can you guess the game? All the salt. I want a complete set of all the salt. Okay, all of the salt.
No,
so I'm prepared to hold out for possibly a couple of turns to get all the salt. Yeah.
Okay, so if you guess the game, let us know.
I think I missed that expansion to Catan, the salt mine expansion. Well, there is a game about salt mining actually, Magnum Cell, which is quite good. Anyway, beside the point. I'll take the literal point, and I'd say
Rob's got it.
I like development cards in Catan, so I would probably keep my sheep, I think.
Okay, and sheep are more renewable, so wood is more important. Nicholas says, in theory, I would. Rob says, I wouldn't, as I know Alex is likely to have the Monopoly card and is being salty, which works very well with what Alan just said. And that is the questionably quick question section. And now let's move on to the brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's the thing which is brilliant? Now, today, the main topic is designers, board game designers working with publishers. So let's talk about why third-party publishers, by which I mean publishers who aren't actually also the designer, why they're brilliant, why you might want to even do this. I think I'm going to say, and let's not give all the reasons at once, we can keep going round. My one reason is just because it's less hassle in certain ways. It makes life easier. Rita, what is your one reason that you like to work with publishers?
Yeah, so I don't have to publish it.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme. Alan?
It gets more of my games out there.
It's a good point.
I think it makes games generally better. I mean, I think just like when we talked about development, and it's a similar thing. More eyes on a project often improves the overall quality.
That's definitely a good point. I'm also going to say that with an established publisher, you know, they've got presumably relationships built up and they're just able to get it out to more people, like with those distributors, with their advertising networks. Do you have anything more to say on this, Rita?
Yeah, so what Matthew said is a very good point, because so making the game better is a very big point for publishers, and it's very important for designers also. So yeah, and when you have very experienced publishers, you could do from a small idea a very cool game. So
Alan?
It cements a long-term relationship with the publisher. So once you've done one and it's been published, then you've got a track record with that publisher, which means it could lead to greater things again. So that's another good reason for it. Yeah.
And
I mean, I guess the other thing is sort of almost a mental health sort of point. I mean, that as a designer is often quite a solitary kind of experience, and if I was self-publishing that, then that would often make that experience even more solitary. So actually having some time just to collaborate, or to even just discuss, or have some sort of camaraderie around a game design is a nice way to live as a designer, a nice way to exist.
That's a really good point about the benefits of collaboration. Speaking of which, maybe after the show we should sort out some sort of dates. But that gives you a quick insight to why designers might want to work with publishers. We've got making the games better, making life easier for the designers, not having to do the work that you don't necessarily want to do, tapping into the established networks of the publisher, and, as Matthew, making the whole process more enjoyable and bearable is putting it in a very negative way. But yeah, more enjoyable, let's put it that way. And if people want to comment, ask questions from Like Follow, you absolutely can. There are a whole bunch of questions that I am going to go through that I've talked about with everyone. So let's start off from the start. When you're thinking about embarking upon a relationship with a publisher, if you're even pitching someone, should you do research before that? Is it important to research a publisher before? I mean, I'm saying that slightly facetiously, but what investigations should you do? What can you do? Rita, start us off if you can.
Yeah, this is a very good point, because so I'm talking in this hour a lot of Spieleautorensumpf, because this is a very important theme for Spieleautorensumpf. It's the first thing we tell the new designers when they come to us, and before, so for example, Göttingen or in Nuremberg or Haar or something like that, we have always a tutorial or a small intro for new designers. And this is one of the first thing we talk about, that you have to look at what publishers are searching for which games. So this is very, very important, because a lot of publishers are not very amused if you are a very a Kennerspiel publisher and they're getting a children's game, but it's so often
So
happens.
for those who don't know, Kennerspiel is like the expert level game.
The expert level game. Yeah. So and it's you can. I don't know how often I did tell this sentence. So look after your publisher, what games they were searching for. But when we talk to publishers, they're always telling us, "Oh, we are getting children's game. We have never published a children's game. So please look at our website or something like that, and look what we have published." So this is a very, very important thing.
Yeah, definitely make sure that the game that you are trying to pitch to them actually fits what lineup they'll probably want. Alan, do you have anything to say on this investigation?
Try and find the right person, which is difficult. I admit it's very difficult, but try and find the right person. I mean, I totally agree. You need to know what the publisher's doing, and if it's a large publisher, they will usually point you in the right direction if you ask the right question. So tell them. I mean, in your introduction, tell them the kind of things that you have got in your portfolio, and they will usually point you to the right person to talk to. I mean, I think in things like the book trade, they use agents for this now. I think it's much less common that people use agents in games publishing, because then other people are creaming off some of your hard-earned cash. But that can, knowing who to talk to is really can be really quite critical, and getting transferred to the right person, which is quite important, I think. But certainly do your research. Do the research on what they actually produce, because otherwise you can be completely barking up the wrong tree and wasting your time and the publisher's time.
Matthew, anything more to add?
Well, I think the other thing that research can talk about, I mean, we're sort of talking about it from the side of fitting into the, being suitable, like a designer suitable for a publisher, but of course research can also be, is the publisher suitable for the designer? Is it suitable for you? And because of course, there are a number of things you might find important. You might find important potentially, ethical or other sort of concerns about how a publisher, stands on certain issues, or how they kind of are represented in the community, or are they representative in their, illustrations, artistic choices, or in their terms of, the kind of themes and settings that they have in the game. That might be important to you. Do they appear to have a very good, social media presence, or are they the kind of company you hear about, various, board game media channels? That starts to tell you a little bit about how effective that publisher is in terms of marketing, and that's very important. And you can kind of get a sense of that by, do you hear about their games? And also even just generally the quality of the products that they're putting out. Like part of that research is, if you can actually hold one of their games in your hand, that tells you, like, would you be happy with that level of quality, whether it's in components or illustration or in rules or editing and these sort of things. So I think more and more, because, we talk a lot about the industry is very crowded and there's a lot of people, but, I think you don't be afraid to sort of seek out the publishers that you want to be represented by, that you want to work with. And that's part of that research, is finding the really good fits from your point of view as well, I would say.
I think that's a really strong point, because for sure there's an element of making sure that we are right for the publisher, but it is a two-way process. The publisher has to be right for us. And frankly, even with my first contract, there was a little bit of that. I think even though Dave Cousins had pitched what's now known as Yogi to Gigamic, the following I was able to check out one of their games. I was able to see, oh yes, actually, I really like what they're making. They make very nice products, because that is kind of what you're able to add when you have a big print run. When I chatted to them, I asked them some sales figures, which I don't think they're public, but I was saying, well, can you tell me how much these two games, which seem to be similar, how much they have sold, so I can get an idea of what the sales graph might potentially be. And then they shared with me, some sales figures from a couple of games, which was really good of them, that they were, firstly, that they were open and willing to do that. Secondly, that the sales figures were good enough that was like, yeah, actually, I would be very happy for my game to sell, even if it so like that amount, which they said, oh, we think your game will sell even more than this. But I was thinking, yeah, even if it sells that amount, then that should be fine. And with Inside the Box, when I did Seize the Power, which it still has to come out, part of it, frankly, is to do with the internal, the fact that they are a bunch of lefties, if you know what I mean. The fact that they are that the political views, because that game's making a certain political message, that aligns. It's like, okay, are they going to get it to the right people? Are they going to make it in the right way? Are they going to make it in an environmentally conscious way? What actually matters to you? Like, one of the things, and we can talk about all of those. Designer Cardboard has one quick question that I think it's worth quickly addressing. Does it matter in this day and age if you're geographically distant from major publishers? Is it easy enough, in your opinion, to build a relationship over the internet? I think is what is meant by it this way. And I would say, hot take, I don't think it matters at all, unless you are actually going to go to someone's house to do some design work or finish off development, which you might do in the case of like someone who's a much, but for it, again, it depends what you're able to do. Are you happy to work together online? Do you both feel comfortable with that? But frankly, my hot take, no, it doesn't matter. What's your hot take on this, Rita?
So I have a very funny example, because for men at work, so I live in Germany. One of the working people of playing games was in Hamburg, in Germany. The agency was in Vienna, in Austria, and the publisher was in Canada. So what you have to think about is for the time change. So this is maybe a little bit complicated, because you have to find a time for everybody is okay with it when you chat, and maybe emails are getting a little bit late because it's taking 6 hours if they have read it and so on. But it worked cool. Yeah, and the other thing is with sending prototypes. So this wasn't also not so easy, because we had to remake the prototype from Canada, because it took too long to send it from Canada to Germany, because we were in a very it was a very strong schedule, and so we had to rebuild the prototype. So this is also so that the post, so email mailings, so real mailings, could take very, very long. Yeah.
But you managed to make it work, and that's the important thing. That it is actually a strong game in the end. Alan, any thoughts on this?
I think it is perfectly possible to do it from long distance. I mean, I was just thinking of the work I did with Modiffius on FX Battles, which I suppose is more of a commission than a straightforward kind of pitched game. And I actually went to their site and did development and playtesting with their team. So it depends on what type of game you're doing for these kind of war game things. it can be quite good. You're not necessarily just submitting a completely finished prototype. Sometimes you might be working on aspects of the game directly with the publisher, in which case being relatively close is useful, not essential but useful. And even then, you see, although they're in London, but they're in South London, and I'm north of London, so it's actually it's at least a couple of hours, 2.5 hours to get there. So it's still not desperately close, but it can be easier than if they were in Canada. Yeah, I guess. if that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. But I think even nowadays, with all the experience we've got with working at distance in COVID, I suppose it's even easier probably to have a relationship with a major publisher from a distance. So I think there's no real problem. Certainly it's not essential. I don't think it's essential. Helpful, but not essential.
I think, yeah, I mean, I broadly agree. I think in terms of actually working with a publisher, once you've sort of signed a contract, I don't think it, I think you always find a way to make it work. And yes, as Rita said, there are going to be specific instances, but I think the hardest thing is that first contact, is establishing that whether that's through a pitching or through or some other kind of thing. I think we still haven't really perfected the kind of online networking / there still is something different, even pitching games online, even over Zoom. I get a different feeling from, I can understand it depends on the type of person you are, but if you are a sort of not social person, but if you connect with people sort of in person with all those sort of non-visual cues and non-verbal cues rather, it's a different method of starting up that relationship. And I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I just know personally, I've most of the relationships with publishers have at least started in person, even if it's just from one meeting, and then maybe have continued completely remotely after that. So that's just again not impossible to overcome, and I think as Beth said, I think within the pandemic we're all getting better. As Alan said, pandemic we're getting all better at that. But I guess that would be my thinking.
I think that Alan made a really interesting point. It depends how much you're working with the publisher, because I know lots of people are very happy to work on Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia. I've just decided to make it a hard and fast rule. I'm not willing to... Yeah, there might be the potential for some sort of exception in very extreme circumstances, but I'm just not going to do anything on Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator, because for me, it's too much hassle. I just find it excruciating, frankly, and that's why I think that, paper games like I'm working on with you three is something where, okay, we can still have something where we iterate on it, we print something out, and then we've still got a sense of, okay, we're going to focus on each other and talking. It's really interesting that Designer Cardboard wasn't talking about is it's easy enough to work together, but easy enough to build a relationship. And that ties in very much into what Matthew said. And I will agree that, yes, sitting down in real life is going to be different. Showing the game or even talking to each other face to face is different, as you say.
Matthew. I think Matthew's. I think there's a very important point there that Matthew made, and that is that to literally just having one face-to-face meeting with somebody that you're going to work with long term really helps, because I think there's something about humans and how we interact face-to-face which is so different, because we get all the non-verbal cues, which basically you don't really get them on Zoom. So I think having, that's why things like Essenspiel and Nuremberg and places where you can actually meet up face to face is so important. Even if you're only meeting that person once, if they come across from Canada or whatever, or come across from the States, that's so helpful. I've got a co-designer I've worked with who now lives in China, But we've met face to face quite a few times before. So the fact that he's in China, it doesn't necessarily get in the way because we know each other a bit more because we've met face to face. If we hadn't met face to face, that would be much more difficult. So you wouldn't actually know how he would react to things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think face to face is still important. Not essential, but it is still quite important because of the human. Because we're humans, we do that.
Yeah. So this is normally I do a lot of appointments in Nuremberg or Essen, and I do also appointments even if I know I don't have the right game for the publisher, but I like to meet the person, and I know that the person wants to meet me too. So this sounds a bit like a date, but it's not. So just for chatting, how is it? How are you doing? And I think this is also very important for the publishers just to see, hey, we're staying in contact, and we are on the same wave, and yeah. So this is very important. But I think after Corona, there would change a lot. So I think it's also impossible to have online appointments on even if there's a fair. So I think this time changes the way we meet also.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. And Keymaker Music says you're lovely, so I'm sure they would love to meet you. And hello, Time Roller in the chat. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to have a quick stretch while we talk about how can a designer. Of course, I think Matthew raises an interesting point. It's not just you are being subservient to the publisher. It is a relationship. But what are some tips for making yourself, not just your game, more attractive to the publisher? Rita, can you think of anything off the top of your head? I mean, things like, I guess, making sure that you're on time for your meeting and actually bathing and basic things like that are...
Normally, I'm very happy when I see the people. So I think I'm coming with a very positively energy in my appointment, and I think this is very important, because if you are very shy and then you're sitting there and then you're telling so this is very important how you speak to the person.
So really good points. Having excitement and something for your own stuff. Alan?
Being professional, whatever that might mean, but yes, having a good sense of time, not missing the meeting. That's quite important. But don't do the basic thing of just not turning up late. Turning up late is just. Well, no. So thing is, I have both hats. So I have, as a publisher or designer, it's helpful if you know somebody is going to actually turn up when they say they're going to turn up. But I do agree. It's being confident, enthusiastic, and actually being passionate about your design. Now, this is very important, but it must be honest passion. You're not overselling yourself. It's being passionate, enthusiastic about it because you really like it and you want to communicate that emotion, that feeling, and you want to convince the other person. But it's not overdoing it. It's not. I was trying to say it's not just it's not advertising
it's sincere advertising.
It's sincere. Yes, it's sincerity.
You don't want to be a used car salesman kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hello, Matt. It is lovely to see Matt's work in the chat, and we're just chatting about how you can make yourself better as a designer to publishers. Matthew.
Yeah, I guess we've focused a little bit more on the kind of the pitching or the meeting stage. I think this kind of advice is pretty general across, I think, well, not just creative industries, but it's certainly not specific to game design. I've heard things echoed in other sort of freelance creative industries, but even outside of that, you just want to be, you know, a responsible and like easy person to work with. A lot of that has to do with, you know, being prompt when replying to emails and, you know, writing clear emails, having a good, sometimes managing information is very important. You know, when you're basically, especially if you are working remotely, as you mostly are, you know, finding a good way to share files. For example, you might have a prototype, you need to share files, or you need to share changes. Being clear about by that flow of information, where can people find things, and communicating clearly. All these things are sort of they have really nothing to do with the games themselves. It's just showing the publisher and that you're easy to work with. In fact, you are being easy to work with by you know, being communicative and prompt. And of course, it doesn't always mean that the favor is returned. Of course, I think we all have stories where, you know, it takes a very long time for publishers to respond to things or whatever. But, you know, at least you put the, you know, your best foot forward. Because I think you don't always know, you know, the different pressures and time frames and things that are involved, and you know, always trying to put your best thing forward means that no matter how the project goes, and you know, look, saying the game gets released, or even the game gets cancelled or something, gets released and maybe it doesn't sell very well. If you come out of it and the publisher goes, well, actually, you know, okay, maybe it wasn't a huge success, but that process was very, very smooth, very, you know, easy to work with you, then that is a really positive thing going forward. Or even if you know, have a game and it ends up not being signed, but the process that you go through by, say, you know, sharing the prototype, the email correspondence, if that's very positive and good, then that you know, you're going to be in good stead for any future kind of relationship with that publisher.
I think the tip about clarity is such an important one. And I remember Jessica Mederingham within the past year said somewhere, in business, clarity is more important than fairness or kindness. You don't want to try to be fair or kind. You want to be clear. That's the most important thing. And over the past month or so, I've been thinking that this is also true for personal relationships. Frankly, whether it's a friend or a housemate or a lover or whatever, I think that you have to be clear with each other and good at communicating before you can be kind or fair. Because if you don't know what the other person actually wants, how can you truly be kind to them? Because otherwise you're just guessing. You're just being kind to a reflection of yourself. And yeah, I think this is a really important thing. And hello, good morning, Joanne. It is lovely to see you. Alex says, it's a shame that being clean and on time has to be a designer tip. I don't think it's just board game. I know that there's kind of this bad stereotype of, okay, geeky, unwashed people. I don't think that's it. And hello, can aliens please abduct me? Thank you for joining us. And the Keymaker says, it's not advertising, but you have to have a good marketing skill in order to pitch your game to a publisher. Am I right? I would say that rather than marketing, I think it's a different kind of thing, because you've got the marketing of one-to-many, where, you know, you've got to do stuff on social media or do advertising. But then, yes, it is its own kind of marketing for sure, this sort of networking one-to-one, where I meet up with Yellow and then they say, hey, this is not a game that we want, but, you know, I like the way that you pitched this, and actually let me spend half an hour telling you about our new imprint of Loki, and you should maybe think about making some kids games, because based on that other, you know, they thought that I might, which, to be honest, I would have probably made some kids games for Loki by now if it hadn't been COVID. But anyway, sorry, let's stop talking about, but yeah, hot takes on this question, Matthew?
Sorry, I lost the button for a second. No, I don't know. I find it. Is there a hotkey that unmutes you? It's just sometimes I lose the mouse. Anyway.
Sorry, no.
No, that's fine. I think, like, marketing is always this. I don't know. I maybe it's the sort of scientist me, but I'm always very, like, aware of anyone who comes off as a bit of a marketer. I think I think what Bez says before about clarity and really underlying that is communication. I think communication skills is just the core thing. And yes, I think marketing is obviously a part of that, because to be a good marketer, you have to be a good communicator. But there are many different ways to be a good communicator, many different styles, and I don't think anyone is correct, but they all have good communication as a commonality between them. So, there can be, you can be very kind of like gregarious and loud, and which I'm guessing, I've never had a pitch with Rita, but Rita, you go in very sort of happy and sort of like with a lot of passion and force, in some way, in a good way, in a sort of, but there also can be a much more sort of like sort of quiet, considered, informative way to present a game as well. There's no one right way, but the communication is thing. And so I would say, yeah,
so Matthew, we have to do a game together, so then we can pitch together.
Well, it's funny, but it always works out that somebody does the. I've always pitched with Brett, essentially, or not always. I mean, sometimes I'm by myself, but you always fall into one person is the speaking, and the other person is like usually moving around pieces or setting up things, And I tend to be the dog's body, just setting up pieces and things like that. So. We could do that, Rita. I think that would be playing to our strengths, probably.
To be fair,
Brett, talking up to you,
Brett's pretty good at. He's pretty good at the gift of the gabs, Brett.
Well, but for better and worse sometimes. For better and worse,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there have been a few new playtesters along to the Cambridge group who've never come back again after getting some clarity from Brett. But,
yeah. Well, there is clarity from Brett.
There's been at least one person in London, but. Frankly, you need to be willing to put up with some harsh criticism, but that is getting away from the point.
I think communication skills is definitely and I mean, a question I have back in a way is do you think that a designer needs to exhibit good team working skills? I mean, I'm not. I thought that might have been an obvious point. You need to be able to show that you can work with people, but actually, I'm not sure you do. I mean, can you be a totally arrogant git? And have some. I mean, you can have obviously a totally arrogant person could have some really good game ideas and come up with some really good stuff.
I mean,
and maybe there's how do you?
I think the quality of the game can means that you're hired or they license your game despite you being difficult to work with.
Yes, it could happen.
I think that if you're easy to work with and your games are good, that's really what I mean. You want your games to be good. That's without question. That's what we've been talking about for the past however many months. But yeah,
I have
very unfair, Michael. Very unfair.
So I have a very good point, because what the K-Maker Music just said, that he's a very good salesman. So this could be good for your first appointment, but when we are pitching, we are not selling something right now, so it's not going into a shop and hey, look, and then the people bought that. The problem is that if you normally you send the prototype to them, and then months, weeks, something like that is gone, and maybe the person is changed, and another person is looking at your prototype now and don't feel the energy you have on that appointment. So it's good for the first impression that they want to check the prototype, of course, but we are not selling stuff right now. We are selling ideas. We are not selling the completely product, though.
And there's been a couple of really interesting points. Communicating an idea clearly can be a really difficult skill to master. I think teaching games a lot can help, says Alex, but it helps to practice talking specifically to publishers because he gets a better idea about the types of things they're considering about a potential game. Agreed. Joanne also makes a really good point. Everyone has different styles they respond to, and so you can't just be all about communicating in one particular style. You have to be empathetic, and you have to be listening to what kind of pitch they want. Maybe some people want a pitch where they play through the whole game, and they actually want to spend 1.5 hours, even if it's a medium weight Euro game. And some publishers might just want, okay, here, show me the sell sheet and be out of here within 10 minutes. QB, Matt, I agree that discommunication and clarity is something that's definitely useful in other aspects of life. And I think that there's lots of game design skills, like being able to take criticism, remembering to divorce your personal ego and identity from your creations, because a criticism of your creation is not a criticism of you as a person. I think that's really important to remember. And I didn't say hello to Michael, so hello to Michael, who wouldn't it matter at what point in development you actually pitched a game to the publisher? Yes, I kind of. And Rita talking about these are not necessarily finished things. Maybe you have to develop things a bit more. For sure, Seize the Power, which I pitched, what I've been paid money for it. And if it were to be published exactly like it is, I would be slightly embarrassed by it. I'm not saying it's a bad game right now, but I'm just saying it's a bit underdeveloped. Do you know what I mean? It needs a wee bit more work on it. I mean, it's a good enough. I think it's a really good game. I'm really proud of it, but it just needs a wee bit more work. Whereas conversely, In a Bind, you know, it had already sold 3,000 copies. That's a more extreme example. And I was like, okay, change this one card. This is the one card that's after, you know, selling so many thousand, and that's a completely different scenario. So yes, I would say that in the latter scenario, you don't need to be good at working with other people. You don't need to exhibit ability to have teamwork. All you need to say is, yes, I'm willing for you to totally change my artwork. I am okay with that. And once they're convinced of that, away they go, as long as it's a fine game. And Keymaster, that sounds like a conversation for another time. I do apologize. We've got a lot to get through. And you need to be more of a salesman or salesperson if your game is just a concept as compared to something a bit more fleshed out, in which case you'd rely more on the work to speak for itself. I kind of agree, although I think you need to be a good salesperson to get that initial meeting, because it's not like publishers are going to play everything that's pitched to them. That's definitely not what they're going to do. There's probably more games that are pitched, and well, for any publisher worth their salt, there's more games that are being pitched than they even have time to read the rules for, frankly. And so, yes, hello, Drawn Onwards. It is lovely to see you. And a quick question from Alan. For Alan, sorry. Have you ever taken a successful pitch and liked the designer more than the game?
That's a good question. I mean, yes,
this could be said for me.
Sorry?
This could be said for me. I mean, I know it's a good game, but
yes,
we're quite close friends.
Yes, but I mean, there's two separate issues, isn't there? I mean, I've certainly had pitches unsuccessfully made to me, and I like designers. But then again, I tend to like designers. I mean, most designers are very personable people. It's quite rare I find it very rare that I would meet a designer and be pitched to a designer and I don't like them. I mean, but then I suppose I'm quite relaxed. I like people, which is in general. So yeah, but I think the important point there is, yes, liking people is obviously a kind of useful first step. But that doesn't necessarily influence you. Well, it might subconsciously influence how you deal with a pitch. But if it's an unsuccessful pitch for me to me, and I like the designer, yes, I may want to look at more work, but it may be that person has got other stuff that fits more. I mean, the first pitch that Rob Harper did to me, he pitched well. It was a successful pitch in the sense that I got the idea of the game very quickly, and he communicated it well. But it wasn't something that we wanted to take on. but it did lead to future pitches, and we are looking at one of Rob's games now very closely for our Pocket campaign series. So, an unsuccessful pitch doesn't mean to say you're not going to get a successful pitch later on, but certainly it's good. It's good to meet people, and people are all different, and well, yeah, interpersonal skills are very important, and most people are very honest when they're pitching, in my experience, or at least you can get to a situation where you get an idea of who the people are.
So I'm seeing quite a few questions coming up, and I'm wondering if we actually need to make this. I know last time you said making the last week's one a two-part, last fortnight's one a two-parter, Matthew. Potentially this could be a two-parter, and then after my 3-week break, then we come back together for a recap of everything, because I still think it would be nice to have that recap at the end to tie everything together. But we'll see how it goes on. I just want to poll the room to see how you peeps think about that. I wanted to talk quickly before we get to the audience question that I really appreciate, what we need to be aware of when pitching, and then also talk a bit about contracts. But when we're actually pitching, is there anything we should be aware of that we didn't get to last time because we already talked about pitching? Anything that we should be thinking about? Okay, is there any red flag from the publisher side? Because as Matthew said, you're making sure they're a good fit for you. And it's okay to say, not really, there's nothing to add. Matthew?
I mean, I think we covered the both in terms of pitching last week and in terms of talking about what you have to do to be prepared for a pitching thing. Yeah, and I think it's getting better at kind of reading, the different signs of. I mean, it's tricky because, I mean, it's a lovely world. The board gaming world's great in a way. It's it's global. There's publishers for lots of different countries, of course. It is very different meeting a representative from a German publisher as it might be meeting a representative of a French publisher. I mean, it's not about stereotypes. There are just differences, and you're not always going to get that right. But there is, over time, you do get some familiarity and some sense of, that publishers do have even their own preferences about how pitches. It's not like that. There's like a global standard that somehow works for everybody. A part of it is just sort of picking it up as you go along. And no matter how much we kind of say like this is the best thing to do, there, communication, etc., research always useful. But you're gonna. I think the thing is to just be honest and open and friendly, because you're gonna sometimes make faux pas. You're gonna sort of like say something wrong, or you're gonna miss the publisher. You're not gonna connect somehow. And I think you just don't get flustered in those moments. Just remember that that generally people are pretty friendly and open, and just try and rescue that and find a way to reconnect. I think that's the overall is to not get too in your head about it, because you can't fully prepare. I mean, and a lot of it is actually kind of experience, on the sense of getting a sense of how different publishers like things to do. That's just preference, right? So.
Rita, do you have anything else to say? That's some really good points about just being mindful. And
so communicating is so important, and for me it's also important to stay friendly. So even if you show them a lot of games and they don't even take one prototype of them, just stay friendly, because maybe in 1 year you're having 2 prototypes they want to test. So maybe it's not the time now. And and I have a very personal experience. So I met a person from a publisher, a redacteur. How do you say that in
editor, right?
English? Editor, the editor. For the first time, and he was so arrogant, and I thought, what is this? Such an asshole. But the thing was, it's he's not an asshole. He's just on his own way. So that's just his way to communicate with people. So he don't is a bad person or something. And I have to check that. And now I'm having a good communication with him, because now I know how to handle it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, being tolerant of other people, I guess.
I think most publishers are I was going to say unique. They are publisher circumstances are often very, very different. So you can't. I don't think you can go to a pitch with an expectation that it's going to work, because it just might not be something that particular publisher can do. They have their own constraints on what they can take on. I've had circumstances where I've used with the same game in the same show. We've probably all had this, where you've got somebody who says, "No, I don't want that at all. It's rubbish. I don't like it at all. It just doesn't work. It's no good." And then another publisher says, "Really like that. We're going to go to the next stage. We'll move on." So it's very difficult. So I think go in open-minded. I think it's very useful to be open-minded about your particular game and other games that you've got, and be prepared to switch tack if somebody might not like one of your games, and they might like something that you hadn't thought they would like. So be aware that publishers sometimes can have things in their back pocket almost. I mean, I remember I went to a meeting with Cosmos, and they were going to start a new range of smaller games. So we hadn't been pitching small games, but they were going to do a run of a particular type of small game. So we were able to pitch for one of those, which we hadn't realized was even possible. So mention things, talk about things. So be aware that publisher circumstances, you don't know the detail of it, and it's worth talking to them about things. Talk around the topic. Definitely.
Yeah, remembering that it's all contextual. It depends publisher to publisher. I think there's a lots of good tips that have already been said. And try to have fun if you've got a publishing thing. And yes, 100%. Just to reiterate, this was said earlier on, but absolutely see what kinds of things they've already published, but also what sorts of plans they have. Time Roller asks, if you've got a great idea, but you yourself dislike the game, should you pitch it to another designer or publisher? And to this sounds like if it's just an idea, then I would, and you're not willing to work on it alone, then you really need to get to designer. I mean, you could do the Turksy method, where it's like, okay, I've got this idea, but I want some motivation to actually work on it. And hey, publisher that I respect and would like to have a game published with, if I made such a game, would you actually publish it? And then if they say yes, maybe that gives you the motivation. But if you don't have the motivation to actually do it yourself, then I think that maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but it feels like if it's just an idea, then pitching to a publisher, unless you're actually just speculatively, would you possibly make this? And you've got some sort of track record of having done games to a certain standard. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to do, unless, I know this sounds very elitist, but if you're someone who's never made a game before and the publisher doesn't know who you are, that's not going to be a very fruitful conversation, I don't think. What do you think, Matthew? Let's go around again.
Well, I mean, the thing I'd say firstly is that unless you're really trying to be, make a lot of money from game design, I think working on a game that you're not very interested in is it's not really worth it ultimately. But I think if you have it, at that point, I think I would just talk to another designer, either to collaborate with that designer, if it's more their cup of tea, or to give them the idea and say, look, I don't want to work on this, but maybe you find this interesting. I think it can be. The other thing too is sometimes is that I personally actually don't really like promising something to a publisher before I've tried it and see whether it can work. Sometimes you can have a great idea and you can sort of go like, oh yes, I could definitely sell this to a publisher, like just with the pitch. But actually, I don't really like doing that until I've tried it myself, because there can be a lot of problems that come up, as we all know, just in normal playtesting, development, etc. And until you're sort of confident that the actual game can stand up to the pitch, like can be the same quality of that kind of one-line pitch, I don't like kind of over-promising, because often then you can get into a bind of like, it sounds amazing, the publisher really wants it, but then you're stuck with this kind of feeling like you're toiling away at the coalface and an idea which maybe doesn't really work, or you feel constrained because it has to match the pitch and all these sort of things. So, anyway.
So I think it depends on how you represent the idea and how big the idea is. So if it's an idea with a big story in it and something like that, I think you have doing a concept or having the first scenario or something like that, just to show something. But if you go to an appointment and just say, I have this idea and this idea, how do you think about that? And so I think if you don't have a real prototype and just putting your ideas out, is not that good. So this is, for example, what I do with the agency. So if I want just to get some input or to having an opinion about something, and also to know which other games in this area are existing, I ask the agency, and they can tell. So yes, this is a good idea, work on it, or oh no, this is not very good for publishers or something like that. But I think you should that do to a publisher.
And any notes from you about this, Alan?
Not really, other than just to reiterate, if you've got a great idea but you dislike it, doesn't sound like it's necessarily very great. But certainly, I would say, yeah, get somebody else to do it. If you think it's great but you actually dislike it yourself, why the heck are you working on it? Yeah, give it to somebody else. I think. Yeah, it's not a pitch though. It's not a pitch. I don't think it's a pitch. Because I mean, if it's an idea, it's not going to be pitched, is it? I wouldn't go to a publisher and say this is a great idea. They might look at me a bit askance, because it's not a game if it's an idea, is it? So, yeah.
Like, it depends on the context, of course. Like, again, if you've got, I pitched an actual. So there's a game that had worked on with Marta Borowiecka and Konrad Konrad Borowiecki. I was kind of remembering how the Polish surnames work. It's enough of that. It's incredibly gendered Polish. But so I pitched a game and they said, oh, well, we're looking for that. So I was like, oh, I've got some vague idea of this. Would that be something that would interest you? But like, just kind of having a quick, 2 minutes at the end of what was already a pitch. That seems like a bit different.
If you have a long-term relationship with a publisher, and you do have a great idea and you think they might be interested, then it might be worth talking to them. But it might be good to say, well, there's a kind of thing that Dave Turksey might do, That's probably the approach to take. I mean, for example, I know that there's a couple of game ideas that the designer of Kingmaker had, which might be suitable for development. That's not necessarily something that I might want to do. I don't know whether I dislike them or not. I haven't seen them yet, but it might be something that somebody else might want to work on. So.
Yeah, I think this is kind of being aware of the work ratio, and I think I agree with everyone else who says if you dislike it, frankly, there isn't enough money if you really dislike it. Right, random thought, a harder exercise than pitching to an established publisher might be pitching to yourself to self-publish. It depends on the whole thing. It depends how willing you are.
I think there's a better, however slim, there's a better chance of me pitching a game to another publisher than me ever self-publishing something. So
I'm getting to the point where I'm weary of it. But let's move on. Let's crack on and talk about if there's any tips for signing contracts. Let's just keep it to like very quick things. We've talked about, yeah, let's go around quickly. Matthew, Cardboard Edison.
Well, I think I was sort of talking before. I think there's just some good resources out there. Cardboard Edison has a great range of, if you go to their website, they've got infographics about contract terms. They've got surveys, a lot of information there. Also the SAZ, Spiel Auto, Rita will tell me the name of it all. But anyway, SAZ, if you, sorry, go ahead.
Spieleautorenzunft or SATS.
I was close-ish. Maybe SATS. They have a great sort of sample contract, which covers a lot of the things that you. So I would say just follow the advice. I've talked on my stream about contracts, things to look at there. I think there's good information out there. Just talk to someone else. Actually, ultimately, if you get a contract, don't accept. Be open to negotiating and talking and asking questions, and don't feel the pressure to have to immediately sign a thing. Because the ultimate, and I think this can be, I'm sort of talking very much at the kind of the first time you sign a contract. I think it's a bit different. But to those people, I would say don't feel this pressure to just accept what the publisher is putting in front of you, as it is. Feel you've definitely got room to both question and make sure you understand it, and to negotiate on various points in that contract. Don't feel pressured. And if the publisher is pressuring you, then that's not a good thing, and that's usually a red flag. So feel comfortable to reach out to somebody else.
Yeah, very, very good point. So I just repeat, Spieleautorenzunft, they have a good contract, but they also have a good person to ask. So if you have questions about that, you can ask them. So writing an email or something like that. And if you don't use Spieleautorenzunft, you can also ask, I think, an experienced designer. So I've never met a designer who said, no, don't show me this contract, I will not help you. So I think, yeah. So, and yeah.
I agree. Spieleautorenzunft, definitely, I'm a member, and it's been very helpful. So yeah, definitely do that. We actually have a sample contract, surprise there, which is derived from a variety of different sources, and so it kind of encapsulates some of the experience that we've had in the past. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of publishers will have what they term a standard contract. That doesn't mean that you sign a dotted line, that's it. It means that is the starting point for negotiation. And there's going to be things that they can negotiate on. And there may be things they won't negotiate on, and they may have a reason for it. And if you don't understand anything in the contract, always ask. The trouble is, the thing about a contract is you never want to go, and I've experienced it, you never want to go to law. The contract is not, well, it is a legal document, yes, but the contract isn't there so that you can enforce it. The contract is there so that you can both understand what the expectations are in the relationship that you've had. If you ever have to go to law on this, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. So neither side will ever want to do that. And that's not the purpose of the contract. It's really to make sure that everybody's as clear as possible about what's going to happen. So if there's anything that you don't understand, what is the percentage? For example, what is your percentage royalty on this, and what is it a percentage of? Those kinds of things are fairly critical. What is the term of the agreement? When does it start? When does it end? What does end mean? What happens to stock that's not sold if the contract ends for any reason? All those kind of things. If you don't understand anything about it, always ask, because they should be able to. The publisher should be able to clarify it. And also, as people have said already, ask other people who are in the know about things like that. So just be aware that it's not you never want to be in a situation to have to legally enforce a contract. It's tortuous, really quite tortuous, and it usually, if you have to go into that situation, it usually means there's a complete breakdown in your relationship with that publisher, and you're trying to get out of that relationship, and it's always horrible. It's always horrible, I assure you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That and quick bye and thank you for being here, Joanne, and thank you for watching Profit and for hopefully the Spiel Autor in Zunft. Sorry, I'm saying it badly. And Cardboard Edison links are useful for people. Whilst there's important things of, look, 1% of trade price or wholesale price would be a really small amount. 10% would be a lot. But like, whilst in terms of numbers, you might always want to have, a bigger percentage, more commitments that the publisher gets this thing out. There's also, qualitative things that these days I'm realizing more and more that you might want to make sure that this bit is actually encapsulated within the game, that this bit is maintained. If there's something about the game that you particularly care about, then fine. If it's a game that has a message, then that's maybe a bit more important to you. Whereas if it's a game that I'm making because I'm trying to make it the best darn kids game that I possibly can, and something that I can feasibly sell at least 20, 30,000 copies every year, then my expectations are going to be slightly different. Maybe I'm willing to, whatever you change, I don't mind, but I'm not going to sign it to someone unless they're willing to say, yes, I'm going to print at least this many XX, 1,000 copies per year. And you've got to be mindful of what you want per game. Game to game, it might be different. Like, anyway. And we've got a quick question for Rita. Let's have this question just now. How does an agency get paid? And can you suggest your agency or any other agency in Europe?
So I knew 2 agencies. So I'm working with one of it. It's White Castle in Vienna, Austria. And it depends on how long are you working together with the agency. So the first contract is you getting 60% of your money you get from
of your royalties.
Yeah. And the agency gets 40%. And after the first contract, it's 70-30. So you get 70, the agency gets 30%. But the agency does a lot of stuff. So they are testing a lot. They are working also when they are making the contract, which is, I think, much more better than I would do that, especially in English. And after writing a contract, they're also testing again with the publisher and making the reading rules again and so on. So I think they're making a great work for the money.
I mean, I don't want. Maybe this should be a separate thing. I mean, I have to admit, hearing that number, I am a bit skeptical about that. Like, even to people getting into that is still potentially quite a lot of money that you are giving up. I know it only happens, once you sell the game, obviously, but
okay, let me just say, if you are a very experienced designer, Matthew, and you go to an agency and the first contract you have is 60-40, it's not good for you, yeah, because you know all the things, you know how to work with publishers. You don't need an agency. So
no, I completely understand that. Yeah. Sorry.
So yeah, but for me, it was my first published game. It was at a big designer, and it was my first contract in English. So I never had the chance. So I would completely having a very, very bad contract if I did it myself. I am completely sure about that. And yeah, and also the communications via Canada and so on. So this was too much for me for the first game. So I was very, very happy to have this agency, and they did a lot of work.
But just as a side kind of, do you think, obviously, like resources available to designers kind of change over time? Like, in thinking of something like Spiel or Tourism, I mean, do you think that some of the things that they offer now, at a lower price, realistically, of membership of SAZ, do you feel like that would be your first kind of recommendation to newer designers to become an SAZ member and kind of like exhaust those resources that are available to you, even with contracts and negotiation?
So I would recommend both. So of course I would recommend Spieleautorenzunft. And normally when you are a game designer in German, you just contact German publishers. So it's not so complicated because of the language, and the contract is in German, and the Spieleautorenzunft is also in German, and you can ask them. But I also want to show games from another countries, not only English, also Russian or something like that. And therefore the agency is great because the contract is in English, and the agency is now working so long with English contracts and having English lawyers they can ask and so on. And also with the rules, I'm not that good in making English rules. So for me, it's very, very good to have this agency. For German publishers, so when I have a game, I decide, okay, this game is this kind of game. I tried myself and tried to give it to a German publisher. But when I see a game, and so this game doesn't work in Germany, so I go work with an agency, and they try to make it in English, France, Russian, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Rita is right there. If the agency is doing work that you can't do,
yeah,
it's kind of like a no-brainer, really. And I can see the attraction of being in the German market, and then if you don't know the English market, the American market, having an agency is very important. I mean, I think that for a lot of us, we've got sufficient experience that we're working across different people. A lot of us have got German friends who can help out with things like that, and very experienced other designers who can help. So it's less necessary to have an agent. But if you're just starting out, it might well be worthwhile, as long as you know the agency is actually doing something which is going to justify their money. That's the key thing. It was interesting because I think the book trade has agents, doesn't it, all over, and there was a reason for that.
But that's because the publishers won't often work,
exactly.
Face with agencies, whereas but there are instances of like the bigger publishers that maybe sometimes, but most board game publishers will be fine without it. Anyway,
yeah.
I think even the biggest publisher, like I know that Hasbro is starting to open its doors, and you can actually, it's not the easiest thing, but you can get a meeting with Hasbro.
I've had a meeting with Hasbro without not through an agent.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We had a meeting with Mattel in the early days of Surprise Dare, which was
and
which
they're
we
like
found,
one
we
of
found
the
quite
big...
surprising. Because we worked with them for quite a while, but that wasn't through an agency, but it was through it was serendipity rather than.
I think it kind of comes down to what do you want to do, what's hassle to you. Like, frankly, look, when I was self-publishing back in the day when UK was part of the EU, and I don't want to make this too political, but basically, a big part of the reason, honestly, and I've realized now that actually there's an ecological benefit to this also, but it's a big part of the reason why I printed within the EU rather than China was to minimize my own hassle. It was more expensive to print in the EU, but it's just easier. I pay the money, and then they can literally be responsible for it until it comes to the house that I'm living in, and they offload it off a truck, and it's basically half a pallet, and I get a whole bunch of games. And boom, that's it. It kind of feels a lot easier. And I think by the same token, like with an agency, do you want to have those meetings with a publisher? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Do you want to examine contracts? Maybe you're happy reading slightly legal looking stuff, and it's up to you. What are you comfortable with, and what are you willing to give up money in order to not have to do? That's ultimately all of these things, isn't it? But yeah, let's move on. So there's two questions that I really wanted to get to, which is firstly, what responsibilities do you have once a game has been signed? Between the signing and the publishing, what responsibilities does a designer have?
I can go. Yeah, it's obviously what we said before about having good communication, being prompt. There'll often be, transferal of prototype, whether they're files or physical prototypes. Obviously you want to kind of keep up all of that. And if the publisher has questions, you want to answer them truthfully and quickly. There is a bit of a bigger topic about development and the role of the designer in that development process. It will depend a lot on the publisher. Some publishers will take on development pretty much wholly by themselves, and they won't expect anything from you as a designer. Other publishers will be completely the other way, where they'll expect you to continue doing development work yourself, really, without much input from the publisher. So I think that's something that, as much as possible, is to have that conversation around when you're going to sign the contract, to talk about what are the expectations going to be past the contract about development, about other work. Maybe some publishers even talk about they might require you to do promotional work. They might require you to go to fairs, or they might require you to, I don't know, write a designer diary or things like this. So as much as possible, have that conversation with the publisher before you sign the contract, and if you can have part of it in the contract, then that could be useful. Again, it's just a guide, and realistically, it's not particularly enforceable, but at least it means you're all on the same page and you know what the expectations are. And I think it's a bigger topic than what we're talking about now, but I think it in terms of, I don't know if there's like a factual thing that you would say about it, but I certainly do have an opinion about, I think there is an unfortunate trend sometimes that publishers do expect a certain amount of development work from designers, which in effect is work for free, which I don't necessarily like that trend. It's not a black and white thing. That's why I'm sort of saying it as an opinion, because of course there are times when it's absolutely reasonable the designer does a bit more extra development work, but I feel like more often than not, sometimes publishers are crossing over the line where really they should be either, paying people to do it, or paying an extra fee to the designer or a further advance or something like that, because there is some publishers are really expecting so much work from designers, even before they'll sign a contract, which I think it's a difficult thing, and I think it's a bit of a product of the industry right now. It's kind of like a buyer's market, I guess, from publishers. I think getting pitched a lot more games they have room in their catalogs for, so they're expecting so much more work being done before they even sort of say yes. But I think that's it's kind of a topic for another time, but it's something to be aware of, that there are different expectations. You want them to be clear in terms of extra work, development work, and promotion and things.
Yeah, I agree with Matthew. It depends on the relationship you've got. It depends on the state of the game and where you stand with the publisher. I've had games where you just hand it over, and you haven't got any more responsibilities for it, and other ones where they want you to be involved in looking at any changes they might suggest and making sure that everybody's happy with it. And but certainly putting what you can in the contract can be useful. But yeah, I basically agree with what Matthew says. But it depends. It very much depends on the publisher, for sure.
And Rita, do you have any opinions on the responsibilities between the game getting signed and the game being published?
That's also very interesting. So today the Spieleautorenzunft posted a Pressemitteilung. I don't know what's the
like a press release, maybe, or
a press release that that it's important that after signing a contract, the designer is working together with the publisher. So because sometimes publishers don't involve the designer, and the sets did show some examples where this was completely wrong. So so the editor didn't forget something about that, and then the game was unplayable. Or they changed the colors, and then it didn't work, and so on. So yeah, so I think it's very important to, that's the that's it. So you can read that on the sets.
And I put
page,
the article in the comments so people can read that after our chat. I think there's been a lot of really good points. Firstly, that it's going to be different from publisher to publisher. Secondly, like the clarity that you desire. I know I've seen contracts where for someone else, when it was, okay, if you redesign the game this way, you will be given a bigger percentage, because you submitted it as a competitive game. Actually, we want to take the main mechanisms, but we want to release it as a cooperative game. Or, hey, if you want bigger percentage, if you can make it so that it's playable with this many players, you get this 1 more percent. If you make it so it's with this many players, you get this much more percent. If you make it so that there's expansions in this way, you get this much more percent. So you can have something in the contracts. I mean, to be fair, with expansions, you're motivated to do that anyway, because you're still, and that's the kind of thing that should all be in the contracts. I think it really very much comes down to this whole sense of clarity. And after a game is published, again, with clarity, as Matthew said, I know that if Seize the Power gets released, I have a duty to go to America, but my flights and my costs will be covered by ITB, and I would be going there to show off the game if requested. And that's something that I'm perfectly happy to do if they're covering the cost. Frankly, I'm sure I would enjoy the event quite a bit to go to Gen Con, which I've never been to. But yeah, do you have any other thoughts about responsibilities after a game is published? Sorry, Matthew, you don't? Okay, Rita? Alan?
I'm not sure it's responsibility, but certainly if there are rules queries and things that come up, there is a kind of responsibility to go and answer them, I think. And I suppose it depends on the publisher. Certainly, I feel myself that if somebody has got questions, then I'd probably answer them as a designer. But then I suppose I'm in a difficult position in that sometimes I'm designer and publisher, and you kind of mix those roles up a bit. But I know with Airfix Battles, for example, we have a lot of questions. Well, not a lot. We have some questions and enthusiasm from our Facebook group for Airfix Battles. And although I think there's nothing in the contract which says that we will support this, I think Nick and I both do that because we feel kind of honor bound to do it because we designed it, and if people have got questions, it's quite fun to help out. I think so. Yeah, not necessarily responsibility, but certainly a kind of push towards helping if there are queries and clarifications after publication is something it's helpful.
one thing that did just occur to me is if the designer becomes aware of a fake or something that maybe shouldn't be around, it's worth mentioning it to the publisher. I think that this sort of legal issue, unfortunately, we get into the whole thing of game copyright is difficult to do, but if you see, I don't know, that was one thing that popped into my head beyond what's been mentioned. Rob has an interesting comment. The level of involvement each designer wants or is comfortable with will vary. It is really good if that level is agreed and everyone knows what to expect. 100%. Staying on the, get things into the contracts, make it clear, get things in writing, not just because you have legal recourse, but because it makes things clear.
One example is Carl Paradis, who designed No Retreat, the whole No Retreat series. He is very, very actively involved on Board Game Geek with clarifying rules. He's since it came out, clarifying rules, answering questions about house rules that people might want to develop, whether they might be good ideas or not, and actually kind of. It's pretty much as far. It's really like developing the game after it's published, in preparation for a new edition. Is the kind of work that he's doing. So spending quite a lot of time and effort on supporting the game, which is already published, in order to make it better. And very often he'll just say, well, yeah, we put this rule in because of X, but actually I don't think it's a good idea now. I think you should change it to this. And after it's published. So that's I think it's a very healthy way of looking at the design. So it's not actually, it's even saying, look, this model that I've got of this particular World War II stuff is a model of state of play at the time, but things might change, and we might think, oh, this new idea that's come in here, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. We'll play test that, and then that might come out as an official addendum to the game. So that's a high level of responsibility. I very much doubt whether that's in his contract, but it's certainly something that he does as a designer.
I guess once you've been through the process a few times, you kind of get a sense of, okay, this is what this person is able and willing to do.
Yes.
But
yeah, I think he's fairly exceptional in terms of that level of involvement, though.
Now, next fortnight, we're going to do a massive recap of all of these shows, and I'll probably spend a bit of time watching all of them to see what additional questions were left unanswered or what we have to talk about. But just before so we'll definitely get to these last couple of things and we'll talk more about this topic then. But just for the moment, do you have any surprises that you want to mention? And honestly, I cannot think of any off the top of my head. Matthew, can you think of any off the top of your head?
Oh gosh, this could be a very long. I don't know. Oh god, I mean, it's funny. I joke with another author that we sometimes, whenever we get together, we just talk about publishers behaving badly. I think, unfortunately, there are lots of different surprises that come. Yeah, I don't really want to get all into it, but from publishers surprisingly refusing to pay advances, or like not refusing to pay, but rather refusing to offer an advance, to like completely losing files, to like mistranslating rules and then retranslating back into another language, and like losing something, from just losing a prototype completely, people changing. I mean, I think the thing ultimately that draws it all together is to remember that everyone's human. Publishers are often small operations, 1 or 2 people. I think Rita made a really good point earlier, is that sometimes the difficult thing is project can take so long that even the personnel changes. And it's not just a problem, obviously, game publishers. Any business, when you have turnover of people in that business, it's going to affect, what's happening. So I guess you just have to go into it with a certain level of resilience, a certain amount of like good humor as much as possible, and to expect that there are going to be some things that go wrong, or the things that don't sort of go the direction you want. I have to admit that the slightly, it's not a sad thing, but and again, it's a bit of a privileged thing to be able to say this, I guess, but as I work with more and more publishers, it's a pity that fewer publishers make it onto the list of publishers I would want to work with again. I mean, there are definitely publishers I would like to work again. So I'm not saying it's all negative experiences, but there's always things that you want to improve, and I think the industry's moving in the right direction, but there are still lots, and different publishers are good different things, I think, is the ultimate point. Again, they're just one or two people, so often they're going to have their own strengths and weaknesses, just as you as a designer will have your own strengths and weaknesses.
That's a really great point, and I think it's all about being, I think people are human, they do make mistakes. A quick hello to Dutch Yoda, thanks for popping in, and Rita, because I know you have to go off in 4 minutes, let me pose both of the questions to you before anyone else. Firstly, what surprises have you had that you wish to mention? And secondly, do you have any other final tips?
Talking about publishers losing a prototype, I had that 1 month ago. So, yay! And this was also a prototype. I worked a little bit longer on it because it was very small pieces and so on. Okay, so this could happen, yes. And another badly surprise is, so it wasn't for, it didn't happen to me, but a lot of other designers I know, so that when you sign a contract and then the publisher said, no, we don't do it. So after that, we don't do it.
They weren't willing to give a written contract?
No. You sign a contract.
Signed a contract, but they never published a game.
Yeah, they never published a game. So it's very important to having a pre amount for this situation. And tips. Yeah, stay friendly. But yeah, I would also say if a publisher really makes bullshit, then you should say that. So you're not a little thing, and the publisher is that big. You have also a voice.
That's a really good point. And Pete, I think it's easy when you're coming in to kind of have misaligned beliefs. You can come into the industry thinking, oh my gosh, I'll go in and then I'll give them this game and then they'll make it the most perfect thing ever with their magical development process. And that's not quite what happens. On the other hand, if you think, oh, I've got to micromanage everything as a designer, obviously that's too far in the opposite direction. But it is going to very much vary from, I mean, like in a sense, Alan Paull, it is, we're kind of working as co-designers, in a sense, like co-developers, I guess. Would you say that?
Co-developers, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, co-developer seems like a good way to put it. Because we are basically flipping the game on its head, rather than, I think, collecting things you're trying to... Oh, no, rather than not collecting things you're trying to actually collect. Anyway, but the point is that, people are different. But I know you have to leave. Thank you so much, Rita.
Thanks, Rita.
And let me...
Thank you, too.
Before you skedaddle, if there's anything that you want to shout out about, that, obviously, if people want to find where you are, then they can check you out on Instagram and Spielen Aufsor.
Yeah.
But
so it's always nice to be here. It was very, very interesting. So I think these talks are getting more and more interesting. So I don't know. I would say Council of 12 has now over 700 supporters. Thank you for that. And it's 2 days. And then it's over. So thank you so much. I wish you a great day and bye-bye.
Enjoy your playtest.
Thank you.
Bye. bye, 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 just for Rita. Bye, 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 bye. I will see you later. Okay, so bye bye to Rita. And the development is working, says Alex. If it's continuing to get better, that's a fair point. And yes, designer cardboard, absolutely. There should be rights reversion in the contracts, and please do check out the blog post that I wrote for more details about contracts and also at Cardboard Edison and SATs. But Alan, do you have any stories about surprises or any quick tips that you feel the need to get in right now?
There isn't enough time. No, I've been working in this industry since the early '80s. So, although I have a lot of stories about surprises, I think that most of the time things go pretty much fairly well, and you can negotiate things and you can work things out. But there, I mean, little things that I've had, like a publisher, despite the fact that the game's been out for a year, a publisher hasn't paid me any royalties at all. None. And I have to get an accountant in to look at the books to find out what the hell is going on. That was the worst experience I've had. And it turned out that well, they were basically incompetent. I mean, thing is, a lot of relatively small companies haven't got very good admin because they're focusing on the other bits of the business. They're focusing on getting things out the door. They're not necessarily focusing on recording what they've got out of the door, which is a bit of a difficulty if you're expecting to get paid on the basis of sales. So, but I think those are exceptions, and I think most publishers are trying to do not all, but most publishers are trying to do the right thing. And that's why in a lot of these talks, I've always stressed having a good long-term relationship. And it's actually another reason why you do want to meet face-to-face. Sometimes you want to find out whether these people are people that you can work with, even if it's just to confirm that they're people you can work with, and being able to spot people that you're not really happy. If you've got qualms about things, you might want to back off. So, but I'm saying the vast majority of publishers are good people, good businesses, and they want to do the right thing by their designers for sure.
Yeah, I think I came off as more negative maybe as I should. I mean, there's a bit of a bias, right? Like I don't even call it like a not survivor bias. What's the word? Like you have a bias towards negative things, and you're and I should say they're often quite positive surprises as well. Sometimes you open up a game and like, wow, the publisher's really knocked it out of the park in terms of the components. I could never have believed. I've certainly been lucky to have that experience. With some of my games as well. So. Yeah, I should probably say that I think it's a little bit of like when we're all been working in the industry for a certain amount of time, it's unfortunately you overemphasize the negatives and you maybe get jaded to the positives, but there are a lot of great
when we first saw the printed wooden pieces for Snowdonia, the Snowdonia Deluxe, that was just astonishing. I mean, they had that. This was quite a long time before it actually came out, because it was part of Kickstarter and stuff like that. But when we first saw them, it was tremendous. They were so beautiful, the pieces.
I think that's a really nice place to finish up on. That, yes, there can be negative aspects. There are also positive aspects. And, yeah, I will try to recap as best as I can. We talked about some people like to print a little before they pitch. We talked about playing Keyforge and Barrage and diets and playtests, whether we would trade sheep for wood. We talked about why publishers are brilliant. We talked about making games better, making the process easier, tapping into their established networks, and also the psychological benefits of working with others. We talked about making sure that the games you pitch match their lineup. We talked about finding the right person at the company. Is the publisher right for you? It's not just, oh my gosh, go with the first person that offers you a contract. Please do not do that. I did get multiple contracts offered to me, not to the point of, here's a contract, please sign it, but they were sincere offers of publication that I did not accept. That I'm very glad I did not accept, because, maybe it wasn't right for the game. Thinking about how much you expect to work together when someone's far away. And you can work with someone very far away, but it's nice to meet them in person at least once. And one in real life meeting might be enough. You get a sense of who they are and you get a sense to make an impression. Have positivity and excitement if you're pitching. Be on time. Be well groomed. Be open to changes. You need that clarity. Be understanding of the other humans. Sometimes you do need to jump through hoops. Like sometimes it's like, okay, as part of this pitch process, you need to make a video and you need to be understanding that this is part of their process, especially when they have a particular process for gauging these things. If there is something that you're really struggling with, like if they say, hey, we need you to make sell sheets, and you know that making a sell sheet is a terrible thing for you, then, you know, there is sometimes a backdoor way to get to it, let's be honest, that some of us might have used. We talked about the difference between one-to-one communications and marketing. We talked about listening and empathy, being aware of what the other person actually wants, being tolerant. Sometimes the other person might seem like they're being a jerk. They might have just a different way of talking about the game and the publisher. It needs to be a fit. It doesn't mean that the game is good or the publisher is, you know, it's all contextual. I mean, yes, there are objectively worse games and better games and work, but you know what I mean? Fundamentally, it's all contextual. Alex mentioned that later games are looking for games with emergent narrative, which might be of interest to you, Matthew. And we talked about setting expectations within your contracts. And we talked about going with agencies who want a 40% of your first game signed and then 30% of subsequents. In the case of White Castle, maybe it's worth it for you. It's up to you to decide what you're willing to pay other people to do. Communicate the key parts. Different publishers want different responsibilities from the point of view of what the designer does. Sometimes you want someone doing shows or development or answering rules questions or doing designer diaries or all sorts of things, and try and put that into the contract so it's super clear. Talking about bad translations or losing files or being forgotten, but on the other hand, you might have really great production that you didn't realize that they even would have the budget or ability to do this. And sometimes there are really nice surprises. And then we talked about humans being fallible and about long-term relationships. Is there anything else that you feel the need to say right now, bearing in mind that we are going to talk about all of this in 2 weeks' time? Okay.
Remember the typing rebellion. Remember the typing era.
I agree with Alex here, and this is why also working with publishers can be, yeah, sure. I have not flossed today. I should floss. Thanks for reminding me. If you want to check us out, then I am Stuff by Bez everywhere. I'm actually going to paste that into the comments. Rita's was pasted into the comments a moment ago. The main thing that I want to remind people about is that please, if you're not already following, follow the LDEC. I'm 2 followers away from 200. And then I promise if I get to 200 by tomorrow, then I'll get Chris to do some sort of interesting competition. I'll make it a really valuable, like, there'll be a one-of-a-kind prize. That's my promise. There'll be a one-of-a-kind prize. That, yeah. Is that, yeah. But Matthew, or actually, sorry, Alan Paull, because you are clockwise, and that's the rule that we established. Alan Paull, where do you like to be found?
I'm usually Alan E. Paull, or I'm Benthamfish. In various places, usually email, because I'm an old. Apparently, I listened to a podcast the other day that said, "Oh, old people use email. Everybody else has other things." But anyway, I'm Alan Paull.co.uk or Benthamfish in other places. But then I'm 64, so I am old. You know, just saying.
When I'm 64. Matthew.
Probably Twitter's one of the best ways to get in contact with me. DMs. I also stream. I'll be streaming tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow morning I have a special interview with Aaron Dunno, who is a designer for Funko games and lead designer on Villainous and
Nice.
you know, great things. So come by tomorrow, the hour before Bez starts streaming. So 9 a.m. GMT. Yeah.
9 a.m. BST, so UK time, because we are currently GMT +1. And I realize that I've been writing EST when what I really mean is EDT, but yeah, that's the way with things. I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you to Rita, who was here, and reminder, there's the Spiel auf Soar and Rita on Fire on Instagram. And thank you, Alan and Matthew. You've been super wonderful. Thank you, Time Roller. Thank you, Alex and Rob and everyone else. And you're all wonderful. And it's the point where before we finish up, I ask over to you, what are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. After this, I am going to have a meal, and then I'm going to do some streaming, which I will talk about after everyone else is gone. So, Alan, what are you up to?
I'm going to have lunch, and then I'm going straight into a solo Kingmaker playtest. Ooh.
Okay. Matthew?
I will also have some lunch, and then I've got a few more meetings this afternoon for various game designy things.
Okay, if you want to check out my next streams, then stuffbybez.com/streams is the way to go. That will redirect you to a Google Calendar, which is public, and you can see I am currently doing 12 streams a week, which is kind of ludicrous. 4 p.m. today, I am playtesting a brand new game with Sarah from Big Girl Games. I'm really excited about this. I'm not sure whether it's playable with blank paper or whether you need grid paper. That's my question for today. Basically, I'm happy with it. I played it yesterday. It seems to work. I'm really excited that it works. It's a polyomino game where one person needs to have cards and everyone else can just play with blank paper. So it's super accessible for like stream or for playing with other people. It's like the new genre that I'm inventing, if I can lay claim to that. And rolling rights where you don't need a printer. That's what I'm kind of calling it. Flipping rights where you don't need a printer. What do you think of that?
Sounds great.
Thank you. Anyway, so that's at 4 p.m. today in 4 hours, and then in 8 hours we're going to be playing Balanceable, which is another flipping rights, which doesn't need a printer, but it is a word game. And then tomorrow morning is going to be an extremely exciting show. If you've enjoyed this one, then tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time for a discussion about Tree Frog and War Frog with Martin Wallace and Hammy, who are the two people who are working together. That should be a really nice discussion. And we're also going to have scheduled tangents about playtesters and people working for free and how money can change things and the utility of publishing. Only 3 streams today, slacking. I am not going to respond to that any more than I already have. Please share, spread the word if you want. And I will quickly check on Twitch to see who we are.
I think Michael's streaming, possibly.
Let's do that. Yep.
He usually is, isn't he? Now?
And I will raid Idol Mikael, who is apparently currently doing just chatting, working out loud on game design on the Rassel Club. So thank you once more to everyone. You have been super wonderful. Lots of love, and this is the end of the show. So for now, bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thanks,
This is the
Thanks,
goodbye
folks.
song. Bye. Thank you for so long. Bye. This is the end of the show. Bye. And now it's time to go. Bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye. This is the end of the show. Bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, Rob. Bye, Alex. Bye, Nicholas. Bye, Alan.
Bye, Bez.
And everyone. And bye, Matthew.
Bye.
And so, yeah, bye. That's it. And I am going to remind people to copy, throw in some hearts for Michael, and we are now stopping the stream. That's